So you're doing it for a podcast.
Sorry?
So you're doing it for a podcast.
Are you asking me or telling me?
Yeah, I'm asking you, are you doing it for a podcast?
I am so glad we're talking about this, and even maybe that you're recording it, because it may suggest that we still don't really know why we're in contact with each other. I'm not doing shit. I don't know who this guy Steve is. Never met him.
Chris Steele.
Chris Steele, rather. Chris Steele. Yeah. And so when I was a while ago soliciting a specific fucking podcast, Scott Crow, who Steele's working with, said, yeah, we don't have a publicist anymore. You're on your own. I sent out an email, got nothing back. And then all of a sudden, this other gent emails me and says, hey, Adam, I'm here to facilitate that other podcast with you. And then I said, oh, that's surprising and great. And then all of a sudden you were there.
Right.
And it just sounds like you and I are doing the same shit, kind of in different parts of the world. And this is just a nice formal way to introduce ourselves. But if you think you're being interviewed for a podcast,
yeah,
you're not. I have no such podcast. I think this is a great phenomenon. I wonder how often this happens. But that's what I was trying to get at in my email.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about the music industry if you want, and if you want to, about your Free Music Stop America project and politics in music.
Sure, I'm happy to have a chat with you. We don't require recording unless you have some site or platform that you want to, publicize what we chatted about. I don't have that. Yeah. I got nothing, dude. I'm kind of just psyched that I'm talking to you, and it's, it's a day ahead. You're the furthest ahead I've ever talked to in an interview or whatever.
It would, well, you know what it's like these days. I think you said in your interview with the Quietus how you'd been forced to start the project again, and you had to agree to be on social media, and how tedious it is. It sounded like you wanted to avoid it. Anyway.
Well, it's not just it's a group, and those dudes they're already on that shit. So when we decided to do it, that dude had been selling his solo shit on that. So I haven't been there. I'm not signed on. I can't even see our own page now. It's been taken. Some of it's been taken down for people who aren't signed on or something.
But the point is,
all kind of like an analogy to that specific phenomenon.
Yeah, you've got to churn out content all the time, is what they say. So this could just be another piece of crappy content that I could shove out.
Other people are appreciating that for exactly that reason. I'm aware of that. So keep talking. Yeah. Tell me how your day is just getting started.
So I mean, you were saying you were going to talk about sort of the past of the music industry, and then I could talk a little bit. You said in your email, you could talk a little bit about the past of the music industry and your experiences with it, as sort of illustrated in your film Free Music Stop America. And then I could sort of talk about how me, as a newcomer to the music industry, I found it very sort of darkly amusing to lift the veil on how it works and how desperate it is for a lot of artists. And then you were going to talk about the future, what you saw as the future. So do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences with the music industry and what prompted you to start the Free Music Stop America project?
Good. Yeah, that sounds great. I'll just go all the way back to, that shit started in the 1920s. People were racing to harness the power of the phonograph. Why? To preserve the speeches of people in power. I don't know if you've read Jacques Attali's Noise, but that book talks a lot about the relation of music to power. And I'll just say that, you know, you had a good run. You had about 80 years almost, 70 years anyways, where the power of the phonograph combined with radio and then television was an airtight propaganda system, and the corresponding rise, social rise of many classes around the world in that century produced such a high watermark of culture across all strata, but music especially. The 20th century of music just in America is ridiculously universally acknowledged as world changing. And then, of course, the rest of the world was contributing to that all the time. And then the balloon burst. And everyone's like, well, this, you know, technology's been advancing the whole time. We've been using it. This certainly can't indicate something different, but it certainly did. And when the file sharing made itself really known, that it wasn't just songs that were getting, traded around for free. It was going to be everything for the future, everything, you know, eventually. And so for me, it was interesting to live, to be of the age, you know, however much older than you, where I got to live how much of my life completely absorbed by the magic and the power of all this great music and the culture industry telling me as a kid, you know, you want to do that shit. So I did it. And then I met all of the Spinal Tap sort of economic and psychological and aesthetic ramifications of that. And then in my lifetime, as I was still sort of a man that wasn't as old and beaten as I am now, I was still grabbing for that. And then the substance at, you know, that you were grabbing at was just not there. It was dissolving, just like the phone calls and emails you were expecting to get back. That world just receded into the mists of history. And the only reason that we're still sort of identifying with that previous time now is because the last big money spenders, the big pimps, who in this case have passed on most of the debt to, a much more, youthful and indebted generation of millionaire billionaires in the absence of any ongoing profit. And so it's like this ghost that's being maintained by people who don't have the kind of dough that, Stephen Sondheim had, and, all these gangsters in the movie industry. We're just talking about like Jay-Z and Dr. Dre and Beyonce as the younger class of millionaires that are holding the debt bag. And in the 25 years since that occurred, your relative new coming to this, probably you've seen all of that. And so you've seen the mad dash to the final cash that results in, far less emphasis on anything recorded and infinite emphasis on merch and being in front of the people again, which Atali would say, you can't do that. You're trying to take us back in history. We already did that part. And now you're trying to put this Mobius strip over the history of how money was made with music. The records were the profit and the live performance came before, and it was just a ancillary way of promoting it. Now it's trying to go back in the other direction. So all these crazy contradictions are lining up with the decline of capitalism, the decline of aesthetics for sure, but the decline of people participating in society. It's all kind of a big fucking dumbassification. And where do you find your own imagination? And, and then that's the story of what you're going to enter on with now, is the last 20 years and now currently.
Yeah.
Unless you want to add something to the brief, very brief ancient history of the recording industry that I just did.
No, I don't. I mean, I grew up with, just as file sharing was coming in, I was still buying records and CDs as a teenager. I can talk a little bit about that and about me coming into the music industry and what I found, if you like.
Yes.
So yeah, so I grew up like worshipping musicians and collecting and just spending all my pocket money on records and CDs, and thinking musicians were really cool. And it was only in the past 5 years when I started putting out music myself that I was amused to find that behind the scenes, musicians are maybe not as cool as you think they are, because they're all desperately trying to get liked, and spending a lot of money to even, the money is not coming to them in most cases. They're spending money to pay distributors to put out their music, to buy targeted Facebook ads, to pay for publicists to try to get them in the media. They're buying false likes on Facebook, false likes on Instagram, false likes on Spotify to try to show that they've got a following already, because that's the way, that only way to get people listening to you. They're paying to get on playlists. I've tried this with my own music, where you pay to get, you pay someone like Submit Hub to submit your music at $2 a time to playlisters, Spotify playlisters, who tell you your music. There are a bunch of kids that don't seem to have ever made any music, that give you advice on how to make music,
right?
And why it's so. Usually, because I'm trying to do something different, a little bit different, like blend future bass and drum and bass, and it won't fit their playlists. So they fear that they're going to lose listeners if they suddenly have something that's a bit out of whack with the rest of their playlist. So they will politely say, oh, you're doing something very different for the genre, and I appreciate that, but it's not really going to fit my playlist, you know, so it's all got to be homogenous. So it's been kind of darkly tragic to find out, you know, or tragicomic to find out all this stuff. There's a guy called Brian Hazard, who records as a synthwave artist. His synthwave artist name is Color Theory, and he documents all his attempts to try to get coverage or try to get listeners. He's spending thousands every month to try to get his music listened to. He has a far bigger following than me, but still not that good. He writes it all off on tax, of course. But to read his monthly emails is very funny, because almost everything fails. You know, he's paying through the nose just to get on playlists, to get his ads in front of people. He's trying to come up with different T-shirt packages, you know, different CD offers, where he's bundling the whole lot of the CDs that he's got in his garage that are coming out the door, you know. You know, there's a lot said about how file sharing took all the profits out of the music industry, and there's this narrative that Spotify doesn't make any money and that's why it's not paying artists. But I was just reading this Bible of the music industry, so-called Bible of the music industry, All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Donald S. Passman. And in the 10th edition that he's just put out that addresses streaming, he's saying that people used to spend on average $45 a year on CDs. Now they spend $85 a year on streaming. So there's actually a lot more money being spent on music by punters, by customers, than there was with CDs. So why is Spotify crying poor, especially when its CEO just tried to buy Arsenal Football Club, you know, an English Premier League football club?
Right.
Especially when he just, when Wrapped 2021, Spotify's roundup of everything you've been listening to during the year, while that was trending the other day, a story came out about how he's trying to invest in AI defense tech, like weapons. So musicians were saying boycott Spotify again because of that.
Totally.
So there is music, you know, there is money to be made in streaming.
Still nothing, not a fraction. Let me just at least interrupt with these different figures.
Yeah.
In my day, it was already a 9-to-1 extortion against the artist. It was the standard corporate record deal payout for a royalty was 0.125, was 12 and a half cents on the dollar after recoup. That was the old words. Now, 0.02, 0.03 is the average. So you are, like you're saying, there is more volume of people, getting individual songs and maybe buying albums on streaming of some kind. But it just seems like the subscriptions are covering a lot of that. They're getting people to pay $10 a month, 8 months of the year, and that adds up to double what people used to go around and buy their 4 favorite records for, or CDs for, or whatever. But I would just say that those figures also are misleading, because people have such a different relation to music anymore. It has become such a secundarized and wallpapery sort of status in culture in general. It's falling far behind, even the other completely corrupt and cheating based other culture industry activities like football, like all the great fucking, cheating and match fixing. You cannot say that people have a different relation to soccer now. Soccer has proceeded to mature at, it just like jazz music in Cuba. But some things have gone down, and the quality of music has gone down, chasing capitalism. I think basketball has suffered a similar fate. Basketball has capitalized the entire mid-court game out of existence in favor of all three-point shooting and fast dunks. And I feel there's something to be said. To me, it's all related to politics, but we're going to get onto that. I just wanted to put those figures out. 0.125 was the royalty rate in my generation, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Then it was completely in flux, and there were no standard that I can say stayed for any amount of time in the last 25 years, except that it proceeded inexorably towards zero. And now we're at 0.002, some a few ticks higher, a few ticks lower, but that's where we are. So, figure that
out. It's even more of a rip-off. They're pulling in twice the money, and they're literally decimated the income for the musicians themselves.
No doubt. I should definitely also say that all that shit you just described, the paying for likes, that's not your unique generation. All that shit was in my generation. All of that was. What's new now?
Yeah.
The heads of the industry are the ones quaking in their boots. They're the ones shitting and paying. Before, the artists were paying those gangsters that ran the game. Now the money is hemorrhaging out for decades, and those few remaining are either cashing out. If they're the Bob Dylans or Elton Johns of the world, they made a mistake. They waited way longer than Bowie to get everything he could get, because it was never going to be another payout. And the other gangsters are trying to diversify into all the platforms that are liquidating the profits by joining Facebook or whatever, some kind of that, chasing that from where their old nefarious billions came from in the music industry. Or they just wrote it off and ran away because they saw that it was coming to every other door. It's already there for every other thing that's been digitized, but I think it's going way further than that. So carry on with your piece of now, because we're kind of in that comedic, exciting depression.
Well, I think a great thing about today is there's hardly any barriers to entry to making music. You can just jump on your computer and start whacking something decent together, which is how someone like me started releasing music. You got signed to a label because you're a very talented musician, but it's
Are you talking
good
30 years ago or just now for our last record?
Both.
Well,
yeah.
Neither, definitely not true. And the cases were different. We did prove something in the market. We had to have real proof for that to happen the first time. Certainly have nothing to do with musical talent, obviously. But this time.
But from watching your performances, I'm talking about, that's my personal reaction.
Okay, great. Cheers.
But,
yeah, we're musicians, and
I've been a Consolidated fan for years and listened to your music, which is very high quality. But the point I was getting to was, because it's such a low barrier of entry, you've got all these sort of, pretty amateurish musicians all around the world who can put out records on Spotify and so on. So it's a new market for what I believe you call the parasitic satellite economy, where there's so many more musicians now putting out records every day, putting out recordings every day, and they're all clamoring to get their music heard. So it's a huge new market to be exploited. I think Spotify charges $500 minimum to run an ad on Spotify if you want to get your music ad in front of Spotify listeners.
How much does it cost to sign up on Spotify as an artist and just have your shit on there?
Well, you worked for CD Baby for a while, is that right?
That is true.
So you just pay the distributor whatever it is. CD Baby I used to use, but I got pissed off.
That was $35.
I got pissed off with their bait and switch pricing. Like they'll say, "Oh, it's only $20 to release an album," then you end up with a bill for $80 at the end of it. So I'm actually with a free distributor called Amuse, who they watch the analytics for every artist that's on their free platform, and if anyone starts spiking, they jump on them and offer them a contract. That's their business model, and that's already it already looks like it's failing, because they're starting to do tiered paid models where they restrict, you can't decide what date you're going to release your record and so on. Totally. But my point was, barriers to entry are a lot lower for making music. It also means that there's a whole lot more people to be exploited, a whole lot more musicians to be exploited these days, I think, from those parasites, as you called them. Is that right?
Yes, and I was even thinking of an entirely different class of people that were far higher echelon of solvency and power. I was thinking of the old school managers and record label executives and booking agents and merchandising concerns, where there was money for that tiny exploitive class that was in a way higher and more real life amount of power and money back then. But same. They're just all the same thing, but they've largely gone away and are replaced by an even smaller, sycophantic group of leeches trying to get, trying to split up 0.03. And I even have a fucking song for that. I'll send that to you.
Okay. Yeah, good. So what do you think is, I was thinking about your free music project. Have you...
Keep talking. All right.
I was thinking about your free music project. There's these guys that have developed. They've produced every single melody and released it as MIDI. Have you seen these guys? So that basically nothing can be copyrighted anymore.
And they sold it as MIDI.
No, they just released it and copyrighted
they
it.
Got an algorithm to come up with the melody.
Yeah. So they've copyrighted every single melody, they reckon, and so that and made it free, so that now no one could be sued for plagiarism.
Cents for.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as what might be the future. What do you see as the future of the music industry then?
It's just a ghost that's playing itself out with the remaining the people who want to piss away and write off so much money to continue to assert the existence of something that hasn't. What I see is the more of what you just described, but then increasingly people are they're seeking other forms of older art to replace what huge place music had in their lives, or they're seeking other avenues of music where they're no longer concerned at all about original artists in the pop world, and they've turned their attention to learning how to play themselves from tutors on YouTube or appreciators of music. Obviously, for me, the idea was to create a specific counteractive, corrective opportunity to replace capitalized music with its opposite. And so that's why I sent you that little thing. I did send you that, right? The little graph, the free music graph.
No.
If I didn't, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It's just something I wrote down years ago because I've been on this shit for decades, and it's very simple. It's just like all the stuff we just talked about. You just conceive of its opposite, and that would be free music. And so the idea of music being involved in the economy is gone. In the same way that medicine and education fail brutally and bloatedly every day in being a helpful sort of way for people to gain knowledge or maintain health. The music industry is all cheese, all bad, and dwindling profits towards zero for everybody. Whereas music can still function in all the great social and solo ways of joy and struggle to learn and gain knowledge, therapy for people who are fucked up by any kind of trauma, any kind of alienation brought on by capitalism, especially brought on by a career in the music industry. So you have these things that are just simple, they're reversals of all the impulses towards monetizing, all the impulses towards an apparatus of bureaucrats and sycophants and parasite or satellite people. It's just it started off just because I was pissed off, and I was at this place, CD Baby, where this punk was basically taking all the last dollars and now unabashedly taking it right from the musician, just by saying the line. And in the same way as Spotify now with people like fucking Drake or Taylor Swift, I don't know who that is, but in those days, that guy also recruited some solvent pop stars right away. And so they were generating some money based on their existing popularity in the old music industry. And that gave a false credibility, for all those that now had no barrier to entry. And so it just sort of added greater alienation and disappointment. But one thing had happened, it made music enter a rapid decline and dumbassification. Why? To be one of those bands that can play live in the absence of profit from the sale of physical recordings anymore. So music just went back to being a live phenomenon, but it got weaker and dumber and more lowest common denominator. That's why we're no longer in the golden age of hip hop. We're no longer in the golden age of revolutionary pop music on any level anywhere in the world. We're now in this sort of, I don't have to tell you, every time you watch a soccer game or anything that's culture, if you read an article in your feed, you're getting some kind of music right behind it. And that's the good gig. That's what musicians want. They want to license their shit to a car commercial or to the background, the innocent background noise of, insurance shit or pornography or alcohol sales, because that's the last place. And those are where my friends, the former, better selling, more popular artists, they get their fucking shit as incidental, tiny music for 5 seconds. Where? In the new season of Succession. I just heard Meat Beat Manifesto. I don't claim to watch these shows, but I was watching this one episode where it was the dude's birthday and he had a huge explosion of his own ego, and I could hear the song Babylon by this group Meat Beat Manifesto in the din of a big club scene. So that dude knows how to remain viable.
Yeah.
And that's because he had a big influence for a long time in the old system. People still love that dude's music. And good for him, because he ain't fucking making dough, selling records. And, not everybody can go out and be a bluesman and just kill themselves for 300 days a year. But that's what most people are having to make the choice of. If you're big enough, you ain't going to be doing it by any kind of TV or recording shit. You're going to be a fucking bluesman driving around playing a lot of dates because you can. And that's how, you know, the aristocracy is tried to prevent the wholesale liquidation of their fortunes. The Elton John, Carlos, all these fools that are making sure that my band or my old band can't actually do a tour anymore because COVID is just shutting everything down, and everyone's completely lost confidence in the machine, being able to get these towering aristocrats all their 500 gig makeups, and then the rest of us all go try to get a gig or whatever. So very interesting, you know, and for me, the free music thing is a natural outgrowth. It's simply a response to my own dumbassification of trying to make it in that biz, trying, you know, the consequences of money and music, the absence of all the great therapy and educative aspects of music, all the real social aspects when you don't go out in public and say, all right, you stay there and we'll be over here performing for you, when you fucking hand out a bag of percussion on the street and everybody's rocking. That's a different phenomenon than a performance. And it's starting to change the names of the participants. There's less and less stars and less consumers, and more people who are just, you know, if they don't play music, then they can paint or they can dance, they can enjoy it and appreciate the fact that some people are, you know, some are beginners, some are kids, we're 5. Some are world-class shredders that I have to beg when I come around to their town around the world to hang out with us for a day and hold us up. All these people get a great non-commodified experience out of that. It's exhausting. It costs you money, but nothing like paying to play, nothing like paying for likes.
Right.
You just have all the good shit. And so that's what free music is shooting for.
So is that the future of yourself and Consolidated and the Free Music Stop America project, is to go on touring different cities and doing an Occupy style concert?
This is totally my idea. You've absolutely nailed it, Matt. The thing is, it's not a solo thing. Consolidated is not free music. Consolidated is my old homie Mark and me, and the third original guy didn't do it, so it's just the two of us. And we agreed to do a record, and then all of a sudden we did these 3 shows in the States, and we needed a drummer. So my old dearest homie, one of the funkiest drummers on the planet, Kevin Carnes from the Beat Nigs and Brown Fellinis, he traveled with us. He said he'd be willing to take on 1/3 of doing like another album. And, you know, the idea for me, both of those dudes know that I do free music, and they've helped me do it before. But those guys are musicians who want to get paid to play music. And so if it's a band, nobody that the band is dealing with, the clubs, the radio station, they don't want to deal with motherfuckers throwing out bags of instruments on the sidewalk or in the club itself and threatening this sort of the last vestiges of some understood and agreed upon baseline experience for people who pay for live music. But if we can do a tour, I'm going to fucking make that happen in one of those or both, and try, because there's not going to be like a lot of touring for Consolidated anymore. We're all like 60 almost or plus. And the thing about it, though, it's a great opportunity to show what that history is, and then to contrast it with free music would be so heavy of a contrast at this point. People are barely holding on to their memory of why they go by the rules of the music industry. Essentially, it's all just a cattle call of the former big names. They're all jammed together on festivals. No one gives a fuck. Most of the bands are only getting back together to get these last crumbs. They all fucking hated each other back in the day. You know, all of those Spinal Tap stories have now resulted in the class of those old people who were able to get enough from those days to try to somehow get something of it now. I don't want to be part of any of that, but my compromise was to make an album with Mark. And the funny thing that we were talking about all the likes and the buying of publishing, and then the people trying to stop people from sampling. We were in the height and the thick of all that tumultuous time of people fighting over the last big dollars of the ownership of sound. But on this record, we're using an entire Patrick McGowan sample from The Prisoner all the way through a whole song. We were prepared to give away the song. It's never been flagged. It's never been taken down. In YouTube, some of the videos that we have done with all other people's shit, they have been flagged. But no one has cared once. Whereas in the 90s, groups like the Beastie Boys lost almost their whole career having to give up a whole album, and then weren't even fucking man enough, honest enough, woman enough to fucking talk about it in their big, Broadway biography plays or whatever they do. But that was big news back then. I mean, people were paying money to you clear samples, and then lawyers were sent around to find out if there were any violators. And now it's been decades since people had sampling as a primary instrument, and an instrument on the rise with great ascendant potential. And basically, Rick James, MC Hammer, and a bunch of lawyers started to bash that potential out of people just because of what Hammer had to do to gain access to a song like that. And then people started realizing, why are you wasting the dough? And that's where people like Jay-Z come on the scene. Jay-Z was a new techno, no sample, like the Golden Age type of phenomenon. There were no fucking Fear of a Black Planet, 3 foot high and rising, huge sampling collage music concrete that was all of our records, all of their records. They went techno because it was less expensive on the back end. And but then now it's 2 decades after that. And so it's really a ghost, in my opinion. And the great thing about it is you're doing it because you love music. And people are coming to listen to it because they love it too. And so what that sort of means is music is now, again, like always, it's totally analyzing and sort of trumpeting what's happening in society, but it's on the front end of what's not happening yet. And I would say free music is on the front end of what's not happening yet, because it is the future economic system, a non-monetized, non-capitalized, or false communismized understanding of what we need to live. It's a new ecological pattern, because we're not going to be on the road touring in buses and planes and wasting all the fucking world and your future to make this circus keep going. Ultimately, it'll be far more decentralized. It'll be a way for people across class to meet at similar levels, similar aesthetics, and work on shit together. Do you ever, did you read that De-Schooling Society by Ivan Illich?
No.
Okay, that's a great one from 70. These are all
Right.
kinds of people in the 60s and 70s were saying all this shit. They
Right.
all died broke, but some of them articulated great, ways to harness education, aesthetics, philosophy in a way that was anticipating the eventual demise of this whole thing. And I guess free music is one that's close to anarchism. It's close to the most decentralized, just based on what you're into. But at the same time, accounting for the important sort of emergence of a new madness, a new mass psychosis that's going on around the world based on, the world's attacking me and saying I'm racist. Fuck you, I ain't racist. And the other people are saying, well, we're all kind of this, we all suffer from this racism. And the more you say you ain't, the more it makes people think you're even more racist. And we got to fucking talk to people instead of just fighting. And so my suggestion is that we talk about weed, or we talk about dogs, or we talk about something that hasn't been weaponized to the degree that music and food and the other things that we used to be able to get off the politics and at least prove to ourselves we can deal with difference. our relatives, our co-workers, our fucking families that we fucking disagree with, we can still watch the fucking soccer game. We can still eat food and play music. We can't do those things anymore. They have become weaponized, at least in many circles where I am. So I'm going weed and dogs.
Right.
See how those go.
Weed and dogs are the future.
It's a future of communicating, going backwards to try to come forward again.
Right. Yeah, I hope it happens.
Word. I mean, the thing is, if you go play music with people, you end up having some kind of conversation that's already predisposed to the positive. The places where I play are all places where people are fucked up, desperate, experiencing poverty, experiencing trauma, experiencing all of the above, and they often are there just for the therapeutic soothing of music. Even if we're playing violent fucking future drum and bass on top of industrial with old, acoustic folk music, whatever.
Yeah.
It's all musics all the time, and it's not for everybody, but everybody gets the aesthetic soothing therapy out of that. But then they realize when they start shaking with us, not only is that also grounding them in a really important physical, psychological way, but it's politicizing them without ever having said a word. We all fucking basically can look at each other and, decide more accurately now sadly, because of the presence or absence of things like masks have become so accepted in such a reductivist and stupefying way. But the thing is, if people start playing music with each other first, there's already an additional layer of trust that may not be there, a kind of philosophical trust in all of us. If you're joining us, you're down with us. And, we go through all kinds of heavy shit where people in this country are angry and racist, or just one of the two. And we're all of that stuff. You discover the power of music again, but we're not performing for people. A lot of people think we are, but you can tell if you sit there for 10 seconds, we're not. It's lessons. It's sort of welcoming people who are feeling socially excluded. It's supporting the food bank that's across the street at the church or whatever for people who have to stand in line in the rain for an hour. So it has all these other functions than entertaining you for money. And people also, they come by that are musicians and they hear our shit and they're like, you all are fucking insane, because we're mashing traditions and anti-traditions that no one has, just because you can. You can do anything that you could never do in free music, because you're not performing for anyone. You're not at any, all you're doing is practicing and creating at the same time. All you're doing is teaching and learning at the same time, helping other motherfuckers out who are trying to, work on a song that they wrote or whatever those circumstances are. They're a great known human way to do it. And then free music also implies you go off on your own and you work solo, work on your own shit, develop your shit and bring it back to us. Because the whole thing is kind of like, you got to be good with other fools, and you also got to be able to deal without fools. Either the ones that you have too much toxic difference, or that you got to be good being alone. You got to be able to work on your shit solo. So there's great social lessons in all of free music.
Okay, sounds good. I think we better wrap it up, because we've spoken for 40.
I just love picking a topic, and me being the old codger, that worked out really well, because I got to do a little before and after, and you could dive into what we're all dealing with now. So,
yeah,
good.
Absolutely.
I totally appreciate that, and send me whatever it is you recorded. Maybe I'll sample it for our next record.
That'd be fantastic. Okay, I will.
Lots of love. Very nice. Have a great rest of your midday, and we'll talk to you again sometime, hopefully.
Okay, cheers, Adam.
Cheers.
See you.
Very nice, Matt. Cheers.